What's up guys, and welcome back to my channel. It's your girl 𝙒𝙖𝙀, and I just want to thank you so much for joining me for another episode of AB's RX for MD. So if you have been watching my recent uploads, you will notice that I have been posting content related to my step 2 journey. I just had my full study journey and vlog, and then I also did share my score, and then I published another video that focused more on exactly what my study routine looked like, what resources I used, how long my dedicated study period was, all that good stuff. So if you have not seen either of those two videos, I definitely recommend you check them out. Today, I want to talk about the strategies that I used during my dedicated study period and on test day that I think really made a difference in how I ended up doing ultimately on the exam. Just to give you a little bit of background, my dedicated period was 4 weeks long, and at the start of that 4-week period, my first practice exam score was a 219, and I ended up scoring a 257. So these were just strategies that I tried to utilize, and I do really think that they made a big difference, so I wanted to share them with you guys as well. So let's go ahead and get right into the video. Okay, so the first thing that I wanted to talk about is reviewing your incorrects, and it seems very simple, like everyone knows you have to review your incorrects, but it does matter how you're reviewing your incorrects, and this is a lesson that I learned kind of over the course of my 3rd year. So honestly, doing a thorough review of questions is going to be pretty time consuming, I'm not gonna lie to you, but it is going to ultimately pay off in the end. Just making sure that you are taking the time to look at those details. Look at what were the details that led me astray. Why did they lead me astray? Where did I get that from? Why did I make an association between A and B when one really did not exist? Also looking at, of course, in the real world, there are a lot of things that can point you in multiple directions, right? But when it comes to test taking, they have to make the test so that they're straightforward enough that there is one single correct answer. Some of the classic constellations of symptoms and things that you learn, you really can start to learn patterns in what those look like and what diagnosis they're pointing you to. So I really focused my review on learning what does a vignette for XYZ disease look like? What is the demographic? Is it usually a male or a female patient? What age group are they usually going to give me if they want me to pick that diagnosis? What constellation of symptoms are they always going to give me if they want me to pick that diagnosis? Really picking questions apart this way will have you, will make it easier for you to identify these patterns when you're in a high stress environment. So let's just take wet, wacky, and wobbly, for example. If you just drill into your head that when you see that constellation of symptoms, you need to be thinking about normal pressure hydrocephalus, you need to try to do a lumbar puncture. Ultimately, you want to make it easier for yourself to be able to identify the things that you know, because you know a lot of stuff, you just may have a hard time identifying it. Okay. This also might seem pretty straightforward, but you really want to become a champion at ruling things out, okay? And this also relates to what we were just talking about learning the constellation of symptoms and things that go together. The more you know of those classic constellation of symptoms, the easier it'll be for you to rule something out when you see it listed as an answer choice. So for example, let's say they give you a 30-year-old female who has a unilateral headache. It has been getting worse over time, and it has also started to cause blurry vision, okay? You may have IIH. You may also have temporal arteritis, right? Of course, in the real world, temporal arteritis is something you do not want to miss in anyone. In the testing world, when they want you to pick that answer choice, they're going to give you someone that's like at least over 50, probably over 60. So when you're given a constellation of symptoms that is similar to that, but it's in a younger patient, for the sake of test taking, you can rule out giant cell arteritis, because that's just not the classic vignette that they're going to give you for the sake of test taking. I do want to reiterate, the real world is different. Okay, so the next strategy that I used is what I like to call the tally method. This is a strategy that one of the professors at our institution taught us about. This is a strategy that you use when you're down to 2 answers, which I found I was often in that scenario. So essentially all you're going to do is you have your 2 diagnoses, and I will actually use a question that tripped me up, but after I went back and I used this tally method, it made perfect sense. So I'm gonna show the question on the screen. I still have highlighted everything that I thought was important. And so basically, with this question, we had a young girl, 3-day history of unilateral abdominal pain, fever, loss of appetite. She is sexually active, uses condoms inconsistently. She did have a period 10 days ago. She has rebound tenderness in the right lower quadrant, blood tinged discharge from the cervical os, as well as cervical motion tenderness, and you can feel a mass in the right adnexa. So for me, I was able to rule this or get this down to 2 answers, and it was tubal ovarian abscess and ectopic pregnancy. Me, I ruled out appendicitis because I felt like we were getting a lot of GYN history, and so I thought they were trying to steer me away from a more GI specific complaint. Also, we did not get any of the characteristic physical exam findings that would point you in the direction of appendicitis, so I really wasn't thinking that that's what we were dealing with. And so pyelonephritis, I also didn't think this was a picture that was consistent with that. Yes, she does have a fever, but typically what you're going to see is flank pain. That is going to be a big one that I've noticed they're going to include in question stems a lot of times when they want you to think about pyelonephritis. So I ruled that out, and so I'm like, okay, we're left with our GYN related complaints. I ruled out ovarian torsion. For me personally, I felt like the pain would be a little bit more severe if it were ovarian torsion. So that left me at ectopic pregnancy and tubal ovarian abscess. So in this situation, I ended up picking ectopic pregnancy, but the correct answer was tubal ovarian abscess. Essentially, what you're going to do is you are going to put 1 tally for ectopic pregnancy every time you see anything in the question stem that points towards that as a possible diagnosis, and then you're going to put 1 tick mark for tubal ovarian abscess. And there's a lot of things that will go in both. So for example, the fact that she is a young sexually active girl can go on both sides. The fact that she's having unilateral abdominal pain can go on both sides. The fever can go on both sides. Inconsistent condom use can go on both sides. So right now we're completely equal. So let's take a closer look at the question stem here. So some important information that they give you, even though they do say that she uses condoms inconsistently, and that is what got me the first time I did this question. I figured, oh, okay, so she's probably pregnant. But they also tell you that she had a period 10 days ago. Remember, we have to separate real world from you world and test taking world. When they are telling you a recent period on a test, they want you to rule out any pregnancy related diagnoses. So that would be 1 tally mark that would go on the tubal ovarian abscess side, that would not go on the ectopic pregnancy side, and that would therefore give tubal ovarian abscess 1 more tally mark than ectopic pregnancy. This method only works if you trust it, okay? And that's not to say every single time you're gonna be right, but I do think it is a strategy that can be really helpful for people who do get kind of stuck when they get down to 2 answers. And that's probably one of the biggest game changers. Now, I did this way when I was studying and during my dedicated. You're not gonna have a ton of time to do this in this like slow, methodical way when you're on the exam. But if you start approaching practice questions this way throughout your dedicated study period, it's going to be a skill that you're going to become better and better at and more efficient at, that you can kind of do more so in your head on test day. Okay. The next thing that I'm gonna say is gonna be like a big shocker, but honestly, you have to trust your gut, especially once you get to your dedicated period. You really have been pouring yourself into studying, learning the patterns. You know so much more than you think you do. When it gets to test day, I'm gonna be 100% honest with you. Things are not necessarily going to look and feel like your practice exams did. I will say the exam looks most similar to the free 120 questions, but in terms of how the questions were structured, I still thought they were quite different, even from the free 120 questions. I felt like there was a lot less detail in the actual exam questions. A lot of things that would have easily pointed me in the direction of one diagnosis, I felt like were missing from questions. I also felt like, even though I felt like they were missing information, the question stems were like twice as long. There was a lot more extra material. So that made the questions feel very different. It also kind of made me doubt some of the patterns that I had learned during dedicated, but there were several questions on the exam that when I approached them, even though I felt like, man, I'd feel more comfortable with this answer choice if they had given me X. They didn't give me X, but they did give me, you know, 3 other pieces of information that are consistent with an illness script that I have in my head. And that diagnosis is on the answer list. So in those situations, you really do have to trust the training that you've done all throughout your med school journey, but also during your dedicated study period, and choose an answer wisely that best aligns what you have put together. Another thing that I found really helpful was leaving the drug ad questions for the end of the section. This is a personal decision, okay? I cannot say that you should or should not do it. I found it very helpful because I noticed on practice exams that had drug ed questions, I would get so sucked into those questions, and it takes so much more time to actually complete that question, and it's only like 2 questions, I think, associated. And then you look up and you are way behind schedule, and there are other questions that you may not get to that could have taken you all of, 20 seconds to complete. Those questions and those points are now unavailable to you. You may have gotten the drug ad questions right, but who knows? There could have been 4 other questions you would have answered in that period of time. Now, this works when you are responsible with your time, right? So you do have to move quickly through your questions. Make sure you're not spending more than 1 minute and 30 seconds on a question, and you will have plenty of time left to go to those drug ad questions. And honestly, I found that like skimming through them, I still was able to find the information that I needed to answer the questions effectively. Okay, so that pretty much sums up like the test taking strategies that I wanted to talk about. The very last thing I want to talk about is taking charge of the things that you can control. It may not seem like a big deal, but it is very helpful to at least feel like, hey, I have control over some element of the day. So for me, I went on the website and I looked at all of the items that are allowed in the testing center. So you are allowed to take a water bottle as long as it is clear. And my first exam for step 1, I took like one of those tiny little 16-ounce water bottles and ripped the label off, and I was like parched. And you have to go in and out of the testing center to fill up your water bottle. And so that's like a signing out process, go get your water, sign back in, and it can just be a hassle. So this time around, I had a 60-ounce water bottle that was completely clear that I had with me in the testing center. I also saw that you were allowed to bring eye drops in, and I did that. Again, with step 1, my eyes were really dry. They were kind of burning a little bit, and they were very red by the end of the day. My eyes are very sensitive to computer screens. I also brought chapstick with me. That was another thing from step 1. My lips were very chapped, especially because I barely had any water. And again, it's like these are minor inconveniences and discomforts, but if you can like control them, why not, The very last thing I did was I actually dressed pretty warm. So where we live is boilingly hot, but I wore not so much a hoodie, but just like a long sleeve kind of like sweater, 2-piece suit. And I'm glad I did, because that testing center was freezing cold and I felt like the air was just blasting on me the whole time. If I had not worn what I did, I would have been freezing cold, and that just would have been a huge distraction from the exam. So that pretty much brings me to the end of this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you found something helpful about this video. Please do not hesitate to leave any questions or comments down below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.